Okay, hi everyone, hi. So here's what's going on today. I'm kind of tired. I think I just didn't get the best night of sleep, and I have to tell myself, like, it's okay to not be full of energy in every single video. But I still wanted to talk about some of my reading that I finished in the last couple of weeks. I didn't do a Friday Reads video last week. I don't know what I did. I did something else. And so today I'm going to do a special Friday Reads about two witch books that I finished that really go together and that I thought I could essentially review together. And it was quite apt as Halloween is coming up next month and spooky season is just around the corner. But before I did that, I wanted to talk quickly about a couple of videos that I watched this morning that just put a smile on my face and that I really enjoyed. The first two are channels that talked about kids books, and y'all know that I am like championing. I need to like learn how to say this word. Championing children's literature here on BookTube, and that was Jeremy Fee. He talked about Aesop's Fables, and the exact copy of Aesop's Fables I actually have on my coffee table, and I'm going to pick that up today because I've been putting it off, or it just hasn't been a high priority. And then the other one was Mrs. Thomas. She's a new channel to me. Bill Ruttenberg talked about her, and she talked about a whole bunch of books from her childhood, and no joke, every single book she mentioned is on my 1001 Children's Books You Must Read Before You Grow Up, which I am reading through. And I just love to see it. I love to see people talking about kids' books and their love for children's literature. And then the last person that I wanted to talk about was John from Hey Y'all Listen Up. He is putting us all to shame with my Jane Austen tag. He told 3 dark jokes, one of which he didn't even say on camera. He just put the joke in on the screen and let us pause it to read ourselves, and that brought me a lot of joy and brought a smile to my face on my very tired morning. Okay, so I have my books here, and I've been trying to think about how I wanted to present them, and I thought I would start with the one that I got along less and the one that I liked a lot more. So the first one was Witch Child by Celia Rees. Both books are on my 1001 Children's Books You Must Read Before You Grow Up. It is a project that I'm doing to read the books on the list, or at least read all of the ones that I can read that are translated into English and that I can get a hold of. As a project to get to know children's literature and the history of children's literature more. So this was on that list. It was on the list, I think, because I'm realizing that the list is a little bit misleading. The list is not all the children's books you must read before you grow up. The list is more children's books that were very popular over the years, that had a moment in time where they rose to popularity, or children's books that maybe did something different for the time. And that, I think, is why this book made the list. This book is a diary of a young girl named Mary, and it's it starts off in March of 1659. And in the opening scenes, her grandmother is suspected to be a witch and then is pretty immediately within the first 10 pages killed for it. And so Mary's life is in danger, and she is whisked off. Essentially, she is saved by a stranger who owed her grandmother a favor, and Mary is put on a boat to America to start a new life there. And she's orphaned on the boat, and they spend about half the time on the boat, and then they get to America, where they get to a colony. I can't remember exactly which one, and she spends her time being a part of the colony while trying to find her way as an orphan and hiding her identity as a witch. Here's the deal with this book. I think that there were actually a ton of mistakes. One of which, I heard Steve Donahue talk very passionately about how there can be an objective review of a book, that books can have mistakes, and that they can be pointed out. And one of the mistakes that Steve Donahue mentions is when a character is brought up in the story and then never talked about again, or if they are brought up and then never mentioned and then kind of pop up at the end of the book. And both of those things happen in this story. The mysterious woman who saves Mary's life is only in it for a few chapters, and then we never see or hear about her again. And there is a character at the beginning of the book that is really not discussed, I think, at all until the end. And I think that those were mistakes. I also, though when I was reading the book, I enjoyed it, I didn't want to go back to it because I wasn't compelled by the story. The setup, I think Celia Rees thought the setup of the grandmother dying and that anxiety and that thrill would sort of carry through the story and give momentum to the story. And yet, I don't think it did. I think that she did kind of a bad job keeping the story going and keeping a good rhythm and a sense of excitement throughout. There were things that I thought were great. I thought that the writing about nature when Celia finally gets to the United States, not Celia, when Mary, the character, gets to the United States, that the writing in nature was very, very beautiful, and that was really where her writing shined the most. But all of this, the sense of anxiety about Mary as a self-proclaimed witch, talking of, with the being around Puritans and having that clash, I only know that sense because of my own history. I don't think that Celia really set that up for me. I also don't know much about witches, so when I entered this book, I had hoped that I would learn more about the perception of witches in the 1650s and the 60s, but I didn't really get a good sense of the... I got a sense that there was people that didn't like witches, but it didn't go any further than that. They didn't develop that. She didn't develop that in this story. And so this overall was kind of a letdown. One second. As I said, it was a letdown, and this really reminded me of a version of the Dear America books that I read as a kid. I loved those books. The Diary of Somebody set in a time period that was not my own. I love that, and that's what this really felt like. This has a scholastic little emblem on it, a little insignia. And I believe it was because it was printed by Scholastic. And Scholastic also printed those Dear America books. One sec. Scholastic also printed those Dear America books. And so I have a feeling that Celia Rees came along. She had this book that had kind of an edgy subject of witches. And they decided to print that as well. And that it was rather successful, even though it wasn't a successful novel for me. So I would, if you're interested in witch books, I would actually pass on this. Okay, this is all full of interruptions today. I'm not really sure where my camera cut off, but I believe I was talking, or I was starting to talk, about how after reading Celia Rees's book, I knew that there was a better book out there. And that, I had suspected there was a better book out there. And I remembered after putting in the data, as I was cataloging my 1001 children's books on Goodreads, which I'll leave linked below, I remember that there was The Witch of Blackbird Pond by Elizabeth George Speare. This is a Newbery winner, which means that it won a literary award for its contribution to children's literature in that year. And I also remember that my boss, while working at the library, talked about how this book seems to have an endless life cycle, that it gets forgotten about for a small time, and then all of a sudden it will pick back up and it will get checked out a bunch. And so I knew that it got some activity at the library, and I wanted to give it a try. So I picked this up at my local library, and boy, did it not disappoint. It was fantastic. Spoiler about my feelings, it was fantastic. This story follows Kit, a 16-year-old orphan young lady who was raised by her grandfather in Barbados. Her grandfather dies. That happens, you find that out pretty quickly, and she has decided to take a ship from Barbados to her aunt and uncle's house in the United States. One second. Okay, so I just was like checking my notes just to make sure that this was correct. And so while Kit is she finds her aunt and uncle in the United States in Connecticut. They live in a small settlement in Connecticut, also set in the same time period in like the 1650s. And there, her aunt and uncle are Puritans. And there are two cousins, Mercy and Judith, who are living in the house with the aunt and uncle. And Kit gets invited in to stay with them because she's an orphan young lady. And boy, these Puritans are very different from Kit's pretty liberated or progressive education in Barbados. Kit knows how to read. She is a fan of Shakespeare. She has not really worked a hard day in her life. She comes in with, I think, 7 trunks of clothing. She's my kind of girl. She's my kind of girl. There's a part in the book early on where she's trying on her dresses and taking her dresses out, and her cousins who are Puritans and live a very simple life, live a life of where everybody's hands are needed, that everybody needs to work hard in order to survive. And they look at their cousin Kit, who's got all these clothes and these beautiful just fabrics, and they look at her and they're almost just like they can't believe that someone like this exists. And Kit just sticks out like a sore thumb in this community, and is treated as such. And what's great about this technique of writing, Kit being the stranger in the town, is that they get to explain to her their life, and that's really effective. Kind of like the newbie. One sec. So Kit's the newbie, and they're showing her the ropes of what Puritan life is like. And so as we're also following Kit's story, we're being explained to in a very generous and kind way what life of in a settlement is like, and what life of the Puritans are like. And so Kit is like learning the value of hard work for the first time. She is learning about the simple life, the fact that like all the clothes need to be handmade. It takes a lot of work to make every meal. And so all of those like domestic details, Gina, I think about you when I think about a domestic details fan. I'm learning that I love that too. It's just super charming. And as Kit is 16 years old and her cousin Judith and Mercy are around the same age, they're marrying age, and so there's these love interests, there's these sort of silly situations that have to do with love, and then there's of course the staunch Puritans. And what Elizabeth George Speare does in this historical fiction novel is that she really immerses you in this life, in this delightful novel, in the life of what it is like to live in a settlement in the United States in the 1650s. She obviously and is clearly the master of this time period. She quotes biblical texts that the Puritans were studying. There's a lot of small references to other literature. I mentioned Shakespeare, and ultimately, this book had so much more texture than Witch Child, just with the quoting and the details about domestic life that Speare just adds in seamlessly. I would also say that all of the characters are incredibly dynamic. They all have their little personalities, and they're all very different from one another. So it feels like a lively household with just a bunch of little, a bunch of lives that are well developed, well rounded. Whereas in Witch Child, almost every character falls short. And then also the plot. The plot of The Witch of Blackbird Pond has a lot of momentum. There's a lot going on in everyone's little lives. From Judith, who has is set on falling in love, to Mercy, who's trying to find her way in the town as a teacher and wanting to do right by the students. There's her Kit's aunt and uncle, who are just trying to make their lives away from the king. They're not anti-royalists, but they want to break free. Kit is a royalist, so too she gets explained to why there are many people, including her uncle, who isn't supportive of the King of England at the time. And so it's just got a lot to dive into. I learned a lot about that time period through this little novel. I learned a lot about the witches and the perception of witches of that time period. Far, far, far more successful than Witch Child. And I would suspect that Celia Rees is actually a huge fan of The Witch of Blackbird Pond, and she wanted to write her own novel based on that. And that's what this novel is actually. So I would skip Witch Child if you can't tell, and I would just read The Witch of Blackbird Pond, a delightful little novel with just wonderful details, wonderful characters, and a wonderful story. So that is my Friday reads. I hope I didn't ramble on for too long. Also, I keep on forgetting that. Oh yeah, so this was copyrighted in 1958. This was published in 2000. So I actually would imagine that my suspicions about this being inspired by The Witch of Blackbird Pond is actually correct. That's what I think. I would like to think that I'm right. And yeah, that's it. So, for spooky season, The Witch of Blackbird Pond, if you're looking for a witch book set in the 1650s, even though it's a kid's book, it's just a wonderful one. A really delightful little novel. Okay, that's it for me. I hope you all have a great day, and I will see you all in my next one. Bye, guys.